In this example, I want to go ahead and take a look at how we will create and launch our first EC2 instance. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Chrome, and I want to connect to my AWS console. And right now I'm in Ohio, and I'm going to select the EC2 service. So within EC2, here I have no running instances. What I want to do is I want to go down to this launch instance. So for this example, I want to launch a free instance, and the free instance that I want to launch is a Linux instance, and I'm going to use Ubuntu because that's what I'm most familiar with. So the first thing I'm going to do over here in this quick start is I'm going to go to the free tier only. So the free tier only allows me to select Microsoft versions of the operating system, Linux versions of the operating system. So Ubuntu is the one that I'm most comfortable with, so that's the one that I'm going to select. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one. And again, I get to configure different options regarding the instance. And what will end up happening is I'm on the free tier eligible instance, and the free tier eligible instance is going to allow me to run for free, but it's kind of a scaled down server. So you'll notice that I can scale up. So depending on how many virtual CPUs I want, how much memory I want, how much internal storage that I want, what kind of network performance I want, as I scale up, I'll end up paying more. So I'm choosing the free tier eligible instance, and I'm ready to review and launch that. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it. And then I get to this screen where it's asking me about a key pair, and this key pair allows me to connect to my instance. So this is going to be really important. I'm going to need to create a key pair that's going to allow me to connect through SSH into my instance. So I want to launch this instance, and then eventually I want to connect to the instance from my workstation that I'm working on. So Amazon's going to host an instance of an operating system, which is going to be Ubuntu Linux. And then I want to connect to that instance using my workstation that I'm using to record this screencast. In order to do that, I'm going to need a key pair. So I'm going to create a new key pair. And the key pair name is just going to be a file name. So this is going to be my MATC demo. Okay, so this is my MATC demo. I'm going to download the key pair file, which is just going to be a .pem file. So it's matc demo.pem. That's my key pair. And then I'm going to launch the instance. Okay, so my instances are launching, and eventually I want to go back and view the instances. And you'll notice the instance state is pending. So what's happening is Amazon's actually bringing up an operating system. So it's bringing up a Linux operating system, specifically Ubuntu, and it's creating that operating system for me. And you'll notice that it has this public IP address and public domain name that's going to allow me to connect to this instance. But I can't do that until this instance state is running. So what I'm going to do is just kind of hang out. I guess it looks like it's just switched to running. And I want to try to connect to this instance right now. So the instance is running and I want to connect. So in order to do that, I have to have a terminal. Okay, and the way I want to connect is through SSH. So I'll show you a couple of different ways that I can handle this too. So if I connect, you'll see to access the instance, use SSH. I could also use an SSH manager, or I can connect through this browser. SSH client is the best option that we're going to have. If you're working from a Windows workstation, you're going to want to download and install OpenSSH. So OpenSSH is an SSH tool for Windows. So you're going to want to download this and install it for Windows. Okay. But on Linux-based operating systems, so I'm using my Mac, on Linux-based operating systems, all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this IP address or this DNS. So I've copied that to my clipboard. and then I'm going to go ahead and open up my terminal. Okay, so I'm in my terminal right now, and what I want to do is I want to switch over to my desktop because that's where I downloaded that key file. So you'll notice this key file that I had downloaded when I created the instance. I'm going to use that key file so that I can connect to that EC2 instance. So it's going to be SSH and then -I, specifying where my key file is located. So here my key file is in the current working directory, so I'm just giving the path to the file. I could also say in the current directory using that /. Okay, so I'm SSH-I, I specify where the key file is, and then I need to specify a username at a location. So my username is going to be Ubuntu. That's a Amazon specific thing, an AWS specific thing, and then I'm going to paste in that domain name that I grabbed, that public DNS entry. Okay, and it's going to say, hey, you know, your key fingerprint can't be established. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I do. So it permanently adds it. And now what's happening is this terminal window, it looks like it was denied. Oh, looks like I was denied. So permission was denied on my public key. So there's a problem with my key file. Okay, so this gets into a little bit of Linux permissions. So if I do a directory listing, I can see all the files on my desktop. But if I do a directory listing with an A and L parameter, it'll show some permissions. Okay, and the way these work is you'll see this first character is a D for the ex_files_AWS_developers_DynamoDB. The first character is a D, indicating that it's a directory. The rest of these things are files, so it's just a dash. Okay, and then I have to work in these characters in groups of 3. Okay, and the way these groups of 3 will work is the first R indicates that I have a read permission, the W indicates I have a write permission, and then the dash indicates I do not have execute permission. If I did, it would be an X, and you can see that in the thumbs.db file above. Okay, so that's my first group of 3. Can I read, write, and execute? And in this case, read, write are enabled, execute's not. My second group of 3, which is right here, indicates that I have read, but I don't have write or execute. And then my third group of 3 indicates that I have read, but I don't have write or execute. Okay, so 3 groups of 3 sets of permissions, read, write, and execute. Okay, so the first 3 characters apply to the owner of the file. So the first 3 characters indicate that the owner has read and write permission, but not execute. The second 3 characters are indicative of the permissions for the group, which is staff in this case. And then the third set of 3 characters, read permission again, is for anyone that's not part of the ownership or the group, then that'd be everyone else. So everyone else can read. Okay, and why that's important in this case is this PEM file, I need to have read access to that file and only read access. So the owner of the file should have read access and only read access. So the way this ends up working is I have a problem here because the owner can read and write, the group can read, and everyone else can read. So the permissions are not set up correctly. I need to make sure that only the owner can read and that the owner can only read. They shouldn't be able to write. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and skip over to Atom. I'm just going to open up a new file. So right now the permissions are read, write, and dash, read, dash, dash, read, dash, dash. Okay? The way this works is if I want to change the permissions, read is equal to 4, write is equal to 2, and execute is equal to 1. And the way I set up the permissions for the owner, the group, and everyone else is whatever permission that I want them to have. If I want them to only have read, I sum up the permissions that I want them to have. So if I want the owner to be able to just read, then the owner is going to have permissions 4. If I don't want the group to have any permissions, I don't want them to be able to read, write, or execute, then the group is going to have 0, and everyone else is going to have 0. Okay. If I wanted to change this around, so just to kind of give you an example, so this is the permissions I actually want for the key file. Let's say I wanted to do different permissions on Linux. Let's say I wanted to basically say everyone has full access to the file. Typically that'll be marked as 777. And the way that happens is basically I'm summing up these things and I'm saying the owner should be able to read, write, and execute, the group should be able to read, write, and execute, and everyone else should be able to read, write, and execute. Okay, and I can have any combination of these. The way it happens is I just add up the permissions that I want, and then I assign them as a number. So an actual 3-character number that I want to assign permissions to. Okay, so now if I go back to my terminal, I want to change the permissions for that matcdemo.pem file. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say, go ahead and change chmod, change mod, the permissions. So I want to change it to 400 for matcdemo.pem. Okay, so I change the permissions to 400, and if I do a directory listing with all of the directory items, you'll notice now the permissions indicate that the owner is the only one that's able to read from that file. Now that I've done that, I'm going to try to reconnect to my Amazon EC2 instance. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the up arrow, where I was at my SSH command, indicating that I want to use that key file to connect to this EC2 instance. And now you'll notice I didn't get any errors, and it tells me some information about the system that I connected to. So it tells me there is no load. I'm using some percentage of my available disk space. I'm using 15% of my memory, no swap, 88 processes, and there's no users that are logged in for this IP address. My terminal window is actually connected to that EC2 instance that's running on Amazon. Okay, so I'll show you this. If I exit, I'm not actually exiting my terminal. What I'm doing is I'm exiting out of that connection to my EC2 instance. Okay, so I'm going to connect again. Okay, so I'm connected again. And if I print my working directory, you'll notice that I'm in my home folder. So what happens is Amazon actually creates a user account called Ubuntu. This is a Linux user account, and I'm actually connected to that server, that Amazon server, and this is my current working directory. That home/Ubuntu is my profile directory for that user account. So I'm able to connect to my Linux server this way. Right now, this Linux server is not going to be able to do much. What I want to do is I want to expand on this, and so as of right now, I'm able to connect to that server that's sitting on Amazon. The server is not really doing much. It's running Linux, but there's no software installed on the server. So this is kind of an unfulfilling demo, but what it allows us to do now is it allows us to connect to this machine through a terminal window. And from that terminal window, I can start installing software and managing this server. So for this video, I just want to focus on how do I start up an EC2 instance, and how do I connect to that EC2 instance, so this Linux instance that we have running.